Fight by John Cronshaw. Seth drove a fist against the dummy's face, grinning at the satisfying thud. How was that? He turned to Milo, wiping sweat from his brow with a towel. The implants worked better than he believed possible. Milo may have been annoying, always worried about the rules and regulations, but he knew how to push a fighter to the next level. A new record. Milo tapped his hand terminal, raising his eyebrows. I mean, it's a pointless endeavor, but let me see that. Seth snatched the terminal from Milo's grip and stared down at the array of graphs and scrolling numbers, turning it against the flickering daylight lamp and nodding to himself. He understood the slowly ascending line marked the incremental increases in strength since the experiments began. But everything else was meaningless. Of course, he wouldn't give Milo the satisfaction of knowing that. I told you I was awesome. Air ducts clicked and wheezed as he kissed his augmented biceps. Don't you think I'm awesome? Rolling his eyes, Milo sighed and reached out an expectant hand. He waited for several seconds before clearing his throat. What? Seth enjoyed this game. It was always the same game, but it never got old. Milo may have been a genius, but he was still a chump like the rest of them. Can I have my terminal? What do you say? He held the terminal between a thumb and forefinger, letting it dangle in his grip. I'm not doing this. I wouldn't want to drop it. Please. Can I have my terminal back, please? Please what? Please, Seth. Seth grinned. That's better. Now tell me I'm awesome. Milo shook his head. This is ridiculous. Tell me. He let the terminal swing from side to side. Okay, you're awesome. Can I have the terminal back now, please, Seth? You only had to ask. Seth shrugged one shoulder and tossed it in Milo's general direction, letting out a laugh when the young scientist fumbled and dropped it to the floor. He pointed and laughed. Good catch. He turned to the mirror, looking himself up and down. I really am awesome. Milo picked up the terminal and glared at Seth, catching his eye through the reflection. You're lucky you didn't break that. He rubbed something from its screen. You're lucky you didn't break that, Seth repeated in a high-pitched whine, then pulled his gaze away from the mirror for a second. You're lucky I didn't break you. Turning back to his reflection, he pointed to his stomach. Have you seen these abs? Milo sniffed. And you wonder why people hate you. Narrowing his eyes, Seth puffed out his bare chest, muscles glistening with sweat and oil. They hate me because they're jealous. He examined his fingernails, listened to the flow of air, the muffled voices echoing through the ship. He told himself he didn't care what the other members of Sector 7 thought about him. He'd heard the whispers and the public accusations. The terminal lit up in Milo's hands. What's with the beeping? Seth had warned Milo before about leaving his terminal's sound on. Its electronic calls distracted him from the mirror. How was he supposed to see how awesome he was if Milo's thing kept going off? Milo squinted at the screen. We've been called to a meeting. Seth let out a long sigh. Who's we? Everyone on board. It's mandatory. Says who? Milo met his gaze, the corner of his mouth twitching. The director. Seth stood with his arms folded across his chest, sneering at the crowds heaving around him. He saw the way they looked at him, the way they judged him. They hated him, but he didn't care. In a way, he felt sorry for them. Perhaps if they were as awesome as he was, they wouldn't see him as such a threat. The horizon swooped upwards at both sides, fading into mist as the daylight strip running through the center of the ship dimmed. The director's face appeared on the giant screen, gray and stone-like. Citizens, there is no easy way to say this, but we are at a crossroads on our journey. Great, Seth muttered. I've got to listen to this guy when I could be in the gym? Milo glared at him. This is important. We estimate that at current projections our food supplies will expire 8 years earlier than expected. We are still investigating how the protein rations could have disappeared. Seth kissed his biceps again. Have you seen how big my arms are? He grinned at a woman who turned from him. He looked around at the restless crowd. I bet I've got bigger arms than everyone here. And so we have concluded that the only way we can complete our journey to Alpha Centauri and survive as a species is if we sacrifice a significant proportion of our population. Seth felt his docility chip activating in the back of his neck, sending waves of calmness along his body. What the director had said was sad, but it was fine. He understood. If people used even half the amount of protein as him, things were bound to run out eventually. But protein meant awesomeness. It was fine. "They're going to kill us," he smiled, turning to Milo. "I know, right? That's really sad." Seth nodded. "That's exactly what I thought. I thought what the director said was really sad. It's fine, though." He wondered how the survivors would be chosen. The best way would be a muscle mass contest, or something where he could show off his muscles. He turned back to the screen as the director continued. "You are probably wondering how we are going to determine who will stay and who will not." Seth turned back to Milo. "Hey, I was wondering that. We survived the destruction of Earth because we were the strongest and best, and now we must find the best among us. Each sector will nominate one champion to represent them in a fighting tournament. The winning sector will remain on the ship, while the rest will not." Another wave of joy spread over Seth. "If you are nominated to represent your sector, you will be kept on the ship, even if you lose the tournament. But you will be responsible for recycling your sector mates." The director paused for a long moment. "The tournament will begin tomorrow." The screen faded to gray. "Wow, a fighting tournament. I'm going to represent Sector 7. "That's the docility chip talking," Milo said. "I thought you hated them." "I don't care. I feel pretty good about being selected. Look at me. I'm the strongest, I'm the best. They'd be stupid not to choose me." Seth curled his lip as he looked around at his sector mates. The sector captain paced back and forth, rubbing the back of her neck as she looked across the crowd. It struck him that it was only taking her so long because she was afraid to make the only decision that made sense. What was there to think about? Shaking his head, Seth stepped forward, barging his way through the people with a swagger. "Look around you. All of you. You know as well as I do that I'm the only one who stands a chance of winning this thing." "But," the sector captain began. "But, nothing. I don't care what you think about me. I'm the strongest and the best fighter." He glanced over his shoulder. "Tell them, Milo. Tell them about how awesome I am. Tell them about my record." The sector captain shook her head. "Is there not anyone else willing to step forward? Do you not care about your sector? I broke the record for my punch." He flexed his biceps, turning to the crowd. "Feast your eyes on these bad boys. None of you come close." "Why are you helping us now?" the sector captain asked, tilting her head. "None of this makes sense." Milo joined Seth's side. "As much as it pains me to say this, Seth is our best hope." Seth folded his arms and raised his chin. Better listen to what the geek says. "I am trying to help you," Milo gave him a sneer. Seth shrugged. "He's only wanting to do it to save himself," a man called. "Why should he live?" Seth shook his head. "Look at me. Do you really think anyone will be able to beat me? I know you don't like me. That's fine. I don't like you chumps either. This is the only way we'll survive. You should be thanking me." He pointed to a spot on the floor a few paces to his front. "You can start queuing there." The sector captain waved a hand. "Fine. You can represent Sector 7. I'd like to think we have misjudged you. It's one of those benefit of the doubt, things. You made the right choice." Seth grinned as the crowd's docility chips kicked in and the people dispersed, everyone returning to their quarters. "I'm going to need you to make sure this docility chip is switched off during the bout." "Done." The sector captain placed a hand on his chest. "I know you've always been a bit of an outsider. I'm very grateful. We all are." She looked him up and down. "If there's any way I can help you out." She ran a finger down his chest and met his gaze with bright green eyes. "You should see me." Seth raised a hand and shook his head. "No offense, but I can do better." She was a 7 at best. Much better. Anticipation hung in the air, thick like Seth's protein shakes. He jogged on the spot at the edge of the fighting circle, allowing his muscles to warm up before applying oil. He stared at his glistening muscles, enjoying the sight under the arena lights. The faces of the crowd became a blur. He channeled all of his anger, all of the rage, all the years of pent-up aggression into this. His muscles twitched in readiness. Milo patted his shoulder. I just found out who your first opponent is. Do you know Stefan Weimar? Seth tilted his head, grinning. Bunsen burner hands? You know him? Seth nodded. We used to train together. We got our first round of augments around the same time. He thought he'd be able to get flamethrowers for hands. It didn't work. So what does he use as hands? Seth shrugged. Just Bunsen burners. He's stupid. There's not even a gas supply. Milo's eyes widened. So, instead of fists, he's got steel pipes? When you put it like that. Seth shook his head. Damn. Here he comes. Seth watched as Stefan made his way to the fighting circle. The director stood between them as they readied their stance. He dipped his head and stepped aside. Fight! Seth beckoned with a curled hand. Hey, Bunsen burner hands. How are your hands? My name is Stefan. Yeah, whatever. Bunsen burner hands. Seth laughed as they circled each other, measuring each other up. Stefan spun on his heels and somersaulted backwards. Seth stepped aside, thrusting a fist into Stefan's gut. You like that? He lunged forward, swinging down with a forearm. Stefan struck him on the side of the face, steel clashing against bone. Seth staggered backwards. He raised his hand, giving the signal to quit. I give up. He's too tough. The director looked between the fighters, cocking his head to one side. If you quit now, you lose. Sector 7 will be recycled. Seth waved a hand. I'm done. He turned and left the fighting circle. The chorus of boos and jeers followed him until the docility chips worked. Guards swooped on the crowd, rounding up the men and women from Sector 7. Mothers clung to their babies while children hid behind their legs. What have you done? Milo wiped a tear. Why did you do this? Why did you quit? Seth shrugged. Milo narrowed his eyes. You did it on purpose, didn't you? Seth shrugged again. The director placed a hand on Seth's shoulder. As you lost the fight, you must press the button to recycle Sector 7. Seth nodded and rubbed his hands together, taking in his sector for one last time. So long. Chumps. The end. Thanks for listening. Please subscribe so you don't miss out on future stories. You can find out more about John Cronshaw's work at johncronshaw.com. This story is copyright 2018 by John Cronshaw.